then I would have a period on steroids and to try and shock it and reset. The problem with that is I then put on weight and I'd balloon. Well, to me, it was a balloon as I go up a stone, and then I couldn't lose it. My metabolism, I guess, is slowing up. I started slowing up. I started losing interest in things, started getting depressed and anxious.
Helen, how did you find carnivore?
Good morning, Dave. Thank you for having me on. It's just over a year, so February 2023. Like a lot of people, it's you're searching and searching for answers. You've tried lots of other avenues, and I just put into the search engine help with brain fog or inflammation and tiredness, and you just go off on your little search and see what comes up. And on YouTube, I think it was Dr. Ken Berry was one of the first ones I saw, and he had a beginner's guide to carnivore. And then I saw a interview with Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. And I'd known him. I've seen his videos before, and he's quite plain speaking, and he seemed to have sort of these fantastic results, and exactly the same age as me, so late 50s. So I thought, oh, that's this seems worth a go. So yeah, that was a year ago. I mean, as a backstory, I was brought up on a farm. I thought fairly normal upbringing, lots of meat, lots of fruit and veg. Now it seems quite peculiar, but then we had milk straight from the cow, which was normal to us. But now it's sort of unpasteurized, and it's again become trendy and expensive, whereas it was just cheap as chips. It was put in everything. So we'd have rice pudding, custard, anything that you could make with milk. And the downside of that is my mum did a lot of home cooking, which was great. But there was lots of puddings and cakes. So fruit was made into puddings and cakes. And so there'd be quite high sugar growing up diet. So that was probably the negative. But I was always running around, very fit and healthy. So I used to run it all off. Into my 20s, which would be going into the 80s then, the fashion became low fat. So suddenly there were adverts on TV with ladies squeezing past tables, having had their nimble bread and their outline spread and low fat yogurts. And of course, being a young woman, even though I didn't need to lose weight, I'm sort of enticed by this idea that I could eat more, because if it's low fat, then, you can have twice as much and not put on weight. But also, again, I'm going to look like a model, obviously, if I'm going to eat these kind of foods. And the other thing I found was that suddenly the dripping on toasts that I loved and the fatty meat was suddenly now, everybody was laughing about how could you have eaten that you're going to send your cholesterol up high and you're going to get heart attacks. And so definitely meat was kind of vilified. It was suddenly low fat, and you cut the fat off your chicken and don't have any skin. But again, carried on, still cooked a lot for myself, but would then eat probably takeaways. And, if I'm out with friends socializing, then I did like a drink. So mainly spirits, but I did sort of creep into wine as well. So again, quite a very high sugar diet, I would say. But compared with a lot of my friends who were faddy and live on black coffee and smoke to keep their weight down, I thought I was doing very well. And again, if I put on a bit of weight, I would just cut back, do a bit more exercise. I was, again, unusual. I think because of growing up on a farm, I weight trained, which was rare for women. We often got given the small dumbbells if you did find a gym. Whereas I like the same as the chaps. I like the heavy ones rather than doing lots of small exercises. I would go for the heavier weights. And I ran, so I loved running. So life carried on, seemed okay into my 30s, had both my children and pinged back straight away with them. And then really it came back to my 40s. So I got it to about 45. And that was when I started noticing rashes. I started getting a rash for no reason. and bits of me started swelling up. So my leg would swell up or my arm would swell up. And then obviously on a bad day, the side of my face would swell up. And that was one thing you think, oh, that's a bit scary, if that's going to happen, and it's going to cause trouble with breathing. So I didn't think anything that much of it. I thought, well, I'll go to the doctors and hopefully there's nothing underlying. If there isn't, then they'll just suggest a change, a pill, and I'll be back to my normal self. Unfortunately, although they meant well and they were trying to be supportive, in a way, I wish they said they didn't know, because what they do is they try and fix it, but they didn't know. But they bounce it back at you. So instantly, well, you weight train. We know you weight train. You look like you weight train. You run. Women in their 40s should not be doing this. You've had 2 children. It's just you're going to have arthritis and joint problems as you go older. So really, you should be walking and jogging, not running, and definitely light weights, not strong weights. You obviously live a stressful life. You've got young children, elderly parents, a full-time job. It must be your lifestyle. So I went off with some antihistamines, and it's awkward because you can't really have a conversation and say, but I think my lifestyle's okay. What else can we look at? You just are left with that information, and then you either take it or you just sort of feel a bit guilty that you haven't done it, but carry on. Things started sort of getting worse. So I would go back and they'd give me stronger antihistamines. Then I would have a period on steroids and to try and shock it and reset. The problem with that is I then put on weight. And I'd balloon. Well, to me, it was a balloon as I go up a stone, and then I couldn't lose it. My metabolism, I guess, is slowing up. I started slowing up. I started losing interest in things, started getting depressed and anxious. And again, I could have a tablet if I wanted, which unfortunately never agreed with me. I didn't get on with antidepressants. And so I just sort of carried on like that, really, sort of trips to the doctors, not really solving it. Then really I sort of went in and the next one, I sort of started getting palpitations. And of course, when I rang up, being in my late 40s, they were thinking heart attack. So I was rushed in and had all these scans, CT scans, various scans that do all your various organs, and a full check, which again is quite nice because I'd never had one before. But they found nothing wrong, which again, great. There's nothing underlying, but it's not answering what's wrong. But same thing again, you're left with this information and you don't know whether to keep going back in or you just go shuffle off home. Obviously I'm fit and healthy. It's me. So, and listening to other people's stories, perhaps it's just as well I didn't keep going back in, because you're just going to get given stronger and stronger medicine, and you're now on this conveyor belt and it becomes normal. And I'm thinking, 10 years ago, I'm on nothing, and suddenly I'm on all these various tablets and things which aren't really helping. So again, you just learn to live with it. I started to work. I changed my business to something that wasn't quite so physical, and I could go a bit more part-time if I worked for myself. So on the days I've got brain fog and I can't think, let alone multitask, if I talked to you and then somebody came into the room, I would knock my glass across the table, so you can't, that foggy head where you can't concentrate, and you just start sort of accepting it and just pushing yourself. So if I wanted to go for a run or I wanted to exercise, you just have to just push through it, and you have to try and do it on a day you don't need to get up the next day, because you're going to feel really tired. So you don't get that kind of lift that I used to get from exercise. But I'm thinking I've got to keep pushing myself, otherwise I'm just going to sit down and not get up again. So we're now moving into my 50s, and HRT came up as online, but not at my doctor's. And they considered that I was still too young to have HRT. Things were still working as they always had done. So until I got into my mid-50s, and I went in with a printout that I printed off from a website with I can't remember her name, Newson, doctor that's in this country, who started up a clinic to help with HRT and things. And I felt that although I didn't have a lot of the symptoms for HRT, the hot flushes and things like that, I did have the foggy head. And I thought, well, maybe it's worth a go. So it was quite a battle, but I did manage to get on to HRT. And it helped a bit, helped with some of the joint pain that I was now experiencing. And muscles. I was having trouble with my shoulders. If I went out gardening, I felt that I could pull a muscle really easily, and there didn't seem to be any reason for it. So things like that helped. But again, it just didn't help with the foggy head and the brain fog. So probably, like, again, a lot of people, a lot of ladies, I hadn't dieted in my life as such. I used to just cut back, so I'd just miss a meal and things like that. So I'd always been, because I like my food, so I'd always sort of been fairly normal about eating. But I had tried in my 40s various different ideas that I guess that seemed to make sense. So there was a lady called Gillian McKeith that said she was a doctor. She had a TV program. She wasn't.
I remember her. The Scottish one, right?
That's it. And like all these things, she comes on and, sells this idea. And I think basically it's a lot of fruit and veg and nuts and seeds. And then the big thing was, it's a bacillus. So it's like a powder that you take, which is a bacteria that's meant to help with your digestion. And it's the good bacteria rather than the bad bacteria that allegedly you're overwhelmed with. So she did a TV program, You Are What You Eat. And and Carol Vorderman was another lady that did something very similar. And I'm happy to give these things a go. So I went in full gusto. But it did mean there was a lot of chopping up and grating and shredding of vegetables to try and make them nicer. And the other problem is that you've got to think in advance. So, because, unless you just have to eat a whole carrot and just go for it if you haven't prepared anything. So I would do these big vats of soup, vegetable soup, and freeze them. So I always had loads. And one thing that was quite nice was that the recipe would be a serving for 4, which I would easily polish off quite happily myself. But it still seemed to have the right result in the fact that I would lose weight. But I would lose weight all over and look a bit gaunt. So, but I never got my energy back. It didn't help with the energy, but I guess at least I was losing weight. So that was quite nice. So both of those were something that I gave a go. I'm trying to think what else I tried. I mean, basically anything like that seemed to make sense when they sell it to you. And the vegetarian side of it, it does make sense. Lots of healthy veg and no meat. So I don't mind, but I do like my meat. So after a while, if I'd lost the weight, I guess I wasn't really feeling that much better. So I would start mixing in mince and beef and making sort of bologneses and things, but just still have plenty of veg in, thinking I'm offsetting it. But of course, it wasn't that sustainable, I don't think, because if I went to a party with a buffet, then I'd just see the rolls and the pizza and all the brown food and just think, oh, well, and for a while you don't put on weight. You could do a few months of eating normally, and then, slowly it would creep back on and I'd just be back to square one. So now, a year ago, I suppose leaping sort of back the other way, I'm back at square one. I'm on HRT. It's not really doing what I want, but, it's doing something. So that's when I popped in, brain fog, inflammation and tiredness. And that's when the carnivore diet came up. And, it seemed great. I thought I'll give it a go, but I'm now a little skeptical because I've done this before. I've watched documentaries where, a cow can eat vegetables all the time, or well, grass, and it's big and healthy and muscly. So that's what we should be doing. So that made sense. So again, when you're listening to the carnivore idea, yes, it makes sense. But I'm now sort of getting a little skeptical. So I watched the beginner's guide, I think, with Ken Baker. Ken Berry. And thought, right, I'm going to go straight into it. That if I do something, I'd rather do it straight off to give it the best possible go. I think perhaps it's impatience, but I think, well, if I start cutting things out slowly, I'm not going to see the results so quick, and maybe I'll lose interest. So I told the rest of the family, you can have the leftovers, you can have the vegetables. I'm just going to eat meat from now on. And to be fair, they've always been pretty good at backing what I want to do, even though I'm sure they think I'm crazy. And sometimes they'll join in, so that's good. And so that was it. I started back in February 23. The first month was a bit of a struggle. You do get cravings, but I have to say that the transition was really easy for me. I had no problems, no adaptation issues. The only thing I would probably say was that if I had a larger meal at lunchtime, then I probably needed a nap in the afternoon. I think the extra fat just made me really tired. So that I started doing, I'm trying to think, Kelly Hogan, I think. She suggested she has a beef patties, she calls it little burger patties. And she made them smaller, and then she would eat them in smaller sittings. So I sort of went to sort of 5 meals a day, but just having small ones. And then so other days it might be 3. And then I didn't get so drowsy. So that was helpful. Didn't really notice any changes. I mean, I didn't have any negatives, but didn't really see any changes. I was still having dairy. So I would put cheese on my burgers and make little sandwiches out of them. And I like my cream. So there was another doctor, an eye doctor. So I think she calls herself a carnivore doctor. And she sort of makes up these little puddings with artificial sweetener or a bit of flavoring. So I was kind of doing a bit like a cheesecake mix. So it would be cream cheese and cream. And those were what I call my emergency puddings. So to kind of keep me spurred on, on those days that you're thinking, oh, I can't do this. So I'm still having that, eggs, cheese, and lots of meat. And then after 3 months, I'm still not really seeing any difference. I did notice that my backache had gone, because I used to get a bit of lower backache, and that had gone. But I thought, well, and again, I think, I can't remember who I was watching, maybe one of yours, and there was a suggestion of maybe dairy that could be an issue, one of the people you were talking to. And so I thought, right, I'll cut out the dairy. And literally, I only cut it out for about 3 or 4 days. So I didn't have any cheese. Still had the cream in my coffee, but I didn't have any, I'm trying to think, milk. So milk, cheese, that sort of thing. And then I tried a cube of cheese on the 4th day, and I felt really sick and queasy and headachy. So I obviously realized that I was having a bit of a reaction. I must be lactose intolerant. So I kept the cream, but carried on, cut everything else out on the sort of cheese front and things. I suppose it got to sort of like 8 months in, and I'd lost about 4 pounds, but I'd put 2 back on again. It used to kind of go up and down. But I think the other thing I found was that if I ate something like a bit of cheese, then I'd feel queasy. So I didn't feel I could go back. And the other thing I found is if I had anything sugary, I could have a small nibble of something, but if I had a slice of cake, then the backache came back. And quite bad. So it would be worse than it used to be. So after a couple of times, I think I kind of worked it out that was what was causing the backache, was the sugar. So maybe inflammation is still roaming around. So we're sort of getting up to November last year, and I'm sort of watching all these videos and trying to look for information, and you do get little nuggets if you watch them through, that suddenly apply to you. But it is a bit frustrating because people are having fantastic results. They've started with much more illness than I had. So I'm thinking I should have been skinny as a rake and loads of energy, and it should have been easy. So it was a bit frustrating. So searching or watching the videos, there was a suggestion that maybe there was something else going on. So possibly my thyroid, because that has similar symptoms, the brain fog and the tiredness. So I did I'd had a normal test at the doctor's, and it came back normal, and they only test for your general thyroid health. So it obviously wasn't bad, but I then decided I would do a private test, and they test lots more elements. And it came back that although it was normal, the TSH, which is one of the hormones, was high, not excessively, but a bit high. And according to the doctor, he said that it means that your TSH thyroid level, it's working too hard. So it has to work harder to be normal. So there was underlying issues that weren't working so well, whether it's the T3 and the T4. So it was overcompensating. So as a general test, it would come back normal, but it was obviously overworking. So since then, I've been taking a herbal supplement with selenium, ashwagandha, and iodine. There's a few other sort of elements, but those are the main ones. Within a month, I could feel some energy coming back, and that kind of, I'd sort of wake up feeling more hopeful and more that joie de vivre, that kind of, oh, it's a nice day today, and I'm looking forward to doing things. And I hadn't had that for so long. So that was kind of nice. I could feel it was a bit of a breakthrough. So over Christmas, I behaved, but I had a little advent calendar of free from chocolate. So it kind of had nothing much in it. It was a bit soapy tasting, these tiny little daily teddy bears or Christmas trees. But I had those. And then a few other little bits and pieces that, perhaps the odd sausage or something, which in this country, it's difficult to get sausage that isn't including bread and other bits and pieces to bulk them out. It's never just sausage meat. So things like that snuck in. I sort of expected to be a little bit tireder because I was doing that. And then in January, I pulled it back again and thought, right, I'm going to eat properly. And I noticed in the last couple of months, I haven't really lost any weight. I've lost maybe another 2 pounds, but I've suddenly lost about 3 or 4 inches around my waist, which I can't remember the last time that happened. If I lose weight, I lose it all over. And this is the first time I've lost it in one place. And I've got this pair of jeans that I'd kept from about 10, 15 years ago, and they fit. Unfortunately, they're kind of not that fashionable now. So having saved them, I'm not sure I'll wear them. But whenever I've tried them on before, if I can get them up, I can't do them up. There's a good 2 inches or 3 inches where you just can't get them around your waist. And suddenly they're fitting. So, the weight's not going, but suddenly inches have gone. And I hadn't really measured that because I assumed that if my weight started going, the two would go together. I hadn't expected that to happen.
So with, the weight loss has been kind of stable, or the weight's been stable, But when you look in the mirror, do you feel like you're changing at all? Do you feel like, oh, I'm looking better today than I was 6 months ago?
It's other people that have noticed. Whether it's because it's very gradual, I haven't really noticed. I feel it's still similar, but it's other people. So somebody I haven't seen for a year, you're sitting there having coffee and they're going, "What have you done? You look brilliant." And, some of it you're thinking they're just being nice. You say that to each other, you're looking good. But they genuinely say that I look thinner, my face looks thinner. But I think because it's been over the year, I'm not sure I should have documented it.
That's yeah, the scale is kind of, yeah, the scale becomes this weird kind of thing that's very unreliable, But yeah.
Yeah, I think I think because some of the videos people have lost dramatic amounts of weight to begin with, although I know I shouldn't focus on that because I don't mind not losing weight if I had loads of energy. But you still can't help it. We're all fixed. Weight's been a thing all my life, even though I haven't necessarily had a problem with it up until more recent years. It was something that everybody discussed. What was your weight? You were always being weighed. You compare your weight to other friends. So it's always something that you sort of use as a barometer of what's happening. I mean, if I watch some of the videos, there's a sort of implication that this time I haven't lost muscle mass. Possibly when I was doing more the vegetable diets, I would lose weight all over, and it was probably more muscle that I was losing as much as anything else, because my waist didn't really get any thinner. It would get a bit thinner, but it was on par with the rest of my body. Whereas this time it's going in certain places, and I'm sort of not losing it off my legs or arms or anything. So I'm wondering whether I'm just keeping the muscle a bit better this time.
So, and you would definitely have that muscle and probably build on it more easily because you were so active when you were younger, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. You can watch sort of bleak stories about as you get older that muscle mass goes a percentage, over the years. And I definitely don't exercise like as much as I used to, but I think you're right. There's the memory of it, so maybe it is easier than it would be for somebody else.
Kind of already got the building blocks there or something,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
where there was nothing like that in my life, so I've got no building blocks.
Well, I was very energetic. I mean, I don't know if that was all the sugar and things I had when I was growing up, but I used to run everywhere as a kid, and that was one of the things that was. And I bale hauled, so I worked on the farm, and back in the day it was small bales, and you needed to by hand stack them and get them in the barn. So I did a lot of that. And I think it tired me out, so that was quite good. Definitely everybody used to. I remember even in my 20s, my brother, if I was a bit down about something, he'd tell me, you haven't been running lately, go for a run. And so I go off for a run, and it was to sort of get rid of excess energy, or just I used to always feel better if I went out and ran. It just used to give me energy and lift my spirit. So it's kind of something I was brought up doing, and I've just carried on.
So, regarding the back pain going, is the time of having the back pain, is that like a bit of a distant memory now? Like, can you not? Is it hard to remember what life was like when you had to deal with the back pain throughout the day?
Yeah, it's. I think we must get tolerant to all these foods, I guess, whether they're good or whether they agree with you or not. So it was more of a heaviness and a dull ache. And definitely if I was lifting things, I would pull something quite easily. Whereas now, yes, you're right. It's rather than saying, "Oh, I haven't lost weight," it's quite a good exercise to actually, if you're saying to me about the backache, I haven't really concentrated on that. All I keep thinking of is, I haven't lost any weight. I haven't lost any weight. So I kind of almost brush that aside. I haven't really sort of sat and thought about it. I think the only time I think about it is if I have something like a piece of cake when I'm out and about, because that's the hardest time. You go out for coffee and everybody's having cake and a cup of coffee, and it's really difficult in this country to find something carnivore. It's easy to eat at home. It's easy to get things that aren't got lots of additives in. It's easy to get plain meat and eggs and things, and good quality ones. But eating out is very difficult, and you feel really awkward if you sort of say, "Oh, can I just have?" So it's not that, they look at you as though, well, that's not on the menu, and you're awkward. So, and of course, a piece of cake always looks exciting, but the moment I have it, that one's quite. Annoyingly, actually, it doesn't happen at the time. It's the next morning. So I can eat a piece of cake and I actually feel fine, and the sugar gives me a little bit of a lift. So for the rest of the afternoon, I might feel quite good. But the next morning, the backache is really extreme. And that's what's odd, is I can't go backwards now, because I guess I'd have to eat a lot of cake to get that down to a dull ache and get tolerant of it again.
It's kind of a really good it's a really good reminder. It's a really good kind of, it's almost like a guard on you, it's like slip up a little bit and it's like, this is what happens, know what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
And it's okay, yeah, as you say, I can't go back.
But I have to say, if this was happening in my 20s, because I'm thinking the same thing when I used to go out with friends, and I loved going out, but there's an element of sort of the introvert of me. I wasn't that social, and I'd get bored sometimes if you went to a nightclub after a while. So a drink or two always made everything more exciting and less, I felt happier and more confident. And one of those drinks would always lead to a few more. And then the next morning, you've got the most horrendous hangover. But I remember kind of going to work and having this really bad hangover and struggling through the day. But it didn't seem to stop me. I mean, it might stop me for a few weeks. But then when I went out again, I think if I was doing this in my 20s, I possibly might keep relapsing. But now I'm older, I think my attitude has changed. You're not immortal anymore. You kind of realize that health is, a key thing, and I don't want to be just sitting about. So anything that is a negative, I don't want to do.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. Back in my 20s, I was the same. It was a very quick recovery, and, you'd be drunk until 11, 12 at night, or you'd be drinking until 11 and 12 at night. You'd go home in a taxi and be back at work at 8 o'clock in the morning or something, and you'd just be drinking Coca-Cola, and you'd be like, "Oh, I feel great." Not so much anymore.
No. Now I don't. Now I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to feel dreadful the next day. And I I was one of those that if I kept on drinking, so if I would sort of just steadily keep going, I would drink myself sober. So I was watching everybody else kind of laughing around and not remembering the next day, and I would be stone cold sober by the time I got home. So, but of course, 3 or 4 hours sleep, that was enough to then you'd wake up with a headache and feeling ill.
Wow. Yeah. I'm kind of, as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, it's nice to reminisce about those old days, but I'm glad I'm not doing that to myself anymore.
I know. It seemed logical at the time. And there's a temptation to do that as well, isn't there? There's a temptation to think, well, God, if I knew sugar wasn't great, but that was, I mean, I used to eat biscuits and lardy cakes and donuts and, cake and cake. And although I guess when I was growing up and in my 20s, a lot of things didn't have added sugar and salt. I don't know, but maybe like a tin of baked beans was just beans back in the day. Whereas now everything's got all this added sugar and salt. So, it's like even more extreme. But I knew I'd got a high sugar diet. Always, if I had a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, it'd be 2 heaped teaspoons of sugar in it. And I could polish off a packet of biscuits, no problem, just on my own, dipping it in a cup of tea. That's no problem at all. But I guess, yeah, because I ran it off, I think I thought I was balancing it. But you look back and you think, gosh, if I'd known what I know now, but of course you can't do that really.
Yeah, and at that age as well, you're just like, even if you knew, you'd probably brush it off, right?
Yeah.
But oh yeah, I've got plenty of time. It's okay. Yeah.
And because I ate a lot of good food, I thought again it was offsetting it. And I had so many friends that would be faddy and trying to lose weight, and so living on coffee and smoking and because smoking was a good way apparently of numbing the appetite. So there was a lot of people on diets, and vegetarian side of things came in. I've got family that are vegetarian, but they were quite picky vegetarians, and a lot of them didn't like fruit and veg. So they would be eating ready meals or Oreo biscuits or something that was considered vegetarian, but because they didn't have the animal elements, apparently, although I always wondered whether some of these concoctions, if there's got lots of elements in them, they can't be totally vegetarian. But so they wouldn't be eating fresh fruit and veg. They'd be eating a lot of this sort of ready-made stuff. So again, I always thought, I eat home-cooked food that I do myself, fresh fruit and veg.
So right now, how are you eating now?
So I'm eating quite strictly because of Christmas, and I did get a bit of backache when I kind of had the extra sort of slice of things that I shouldn't have. With sugar, it's the sugar that's the worst one for me. So I eat a lot of mince because it's quite cheap, and steaks, mainly sort of rump steaks, but whatever. A lot of it's supermarket. I'd like to find a butcher that sort of does various cuts, but I'm trying not to put too much pressure on myself and go too wild. It's fine. I just order it from the supermarket, and it seems pretty good stuff. So I do quite like. So I sort of have the same list every week. So I'll have a tray of chicken. I still can't eat chicken skin, so I just put loads of butter on it, which I love. So very buttery chicken. It's either in the air fryer or I fry it up in little cubes with butter, which is quite nice. It sort of makes it like a dry, buttery chicken. That's quite nice. Lots of mince, steaks. I quite like gammon, so I buy sort of gammon steaks. Or I might buy a whole gammon and then I can cut that up into slices. And that's quite handy. That and sort of say a roast beef joint, because I can eat it that day and then I can slice it up. So if I'm going anywhere, then I can make up a little sandwich box of cut meat that I can then eat if there's nothing else, so that I'm not tempted to go for something. I don't do dairy. I gave up cream, and that did the same thing. The thing I notice now is if I give something up, if I give it up for a couple of days, if I then put it back in, if I'm going to have a problem with it, it's quite extreme. So I've got really sensitive. So I tried cutting the cream out because, again, I'm just trying to work out why my energy is not fantastic. So I knocked the cream on the head. So I sort of have one black coffee in the morning with a bit of stevia in. And again, I'm sort of thinking I probably should get rid of that one as well. But if you're a bit tired in the morning, it just helps. And so what else did I give up? Oh, eggs. that was a weird one. I have eggs normally for breakfast, scrambled eggs, boiled eggs with lots of butter and salt. But I was going out with a friend and I thought I'll do some boiled eggs to take with me. And so I've been fine in the mornings having the eggs, I thought. And then I boiled these eggs one evening and thought I'm going to actually eat one now. I'll just snack on one and put the rest in the box for the next day. And I couldn't believe it. I felt really sick and headachy. And that was just for one boiled egg. So I don't know what's happened there. I don't know why I can eat them in the morning, whether it's because I put lots of butter with them. But something's going on there. So I've cut the eggs out at the moment, hoping that might be another reason I'm not picking up enough, if there's inflammation still and that's causing it. So yeah, so cut out eggs. So it's mainly meat of any sort. Oh, lamb. So I'll get a little tray of lamb steaks. I've got a friend that does pheasant shooting, so every so often he'll get me some pheasant, and he sorts it all out. He just cuts the little breasts off, and then I can cook that up. And he doesn't hang them very long because I don't like them when they've been hung a long time, which is quite fashionable. So they're like stronger. I don't like that. So he usually does them fresh for me. So anything like that. The other thing I do is little with the mince. I either fry it up if I'm bored, because I get the 80-20. We can get that quite easily. So I'll either fry that up and maybe put a bit of onion in and maybe a little bit of thyme just to give it a bit of flavour. Otherwise, lots of salt, because I do quite like that. But then I also make up my little snack, little meatballs. So I'll make up a batch, which I put in the air fryer, and I make up either little patties or little meatballs. And then I put them in a box. So if I get hungry during the day, then I just have one of those.
Oh, nice. And so you're basically having 2 meals a day?
It varies. So I'd
And
say
snack.
mainly 2 meals. Definitely at the weekend. I'll eat breakfast a bit later, and then I'll have probably, an afternoon, early evening. So it'll be about 4 or 5 I'll eat. But during the week, if I'm working and perhaps I've gone for a run in the morning and then I'm working, I'll have breakfast after I've gone for a run, and then I'll have a couple of these little burger or meatballs at lunchtime if I get hungry, and then I'll have a main meal in the evening, which might be a steak or a lamb steak or a bit of chicken. So it sort of varies. I always wake up really hungry, but I try and go for a run or something first, and then have my breakfast.
And how does this work in with the meals with the family?
It's fine. Both of my kids are young adults now, so it's timed quite well, because I used to cook a lot, but I always did teach them to cook as well, because I wasn't really taught to cook. So it's something we've always kind of done, and it's something, quite fun to do with them. But I used to do a lot of bologneses, lasagnas, and casseroles, and so lots of things like that. And of course, all of a sudden, I'm just frying up a steak. But my son loves cooking. He's suddenly quite enjoying it. So he orders his food. He has a list from the shop, and he cooks his own food. And pretty much my daughter does as well. We work together, so sometimes we will cook something similar. So we'll both do the chicken in the air fryer, and we'll do it together. And then she'll add something. So she'll put some veg with it, or some pasta or something like that. So we kind of work that way. Or they just do their own thing. So they might have takeaways, but once a month they might have a takeaway, just the idea. And I used to get really jealous, and they all still keep offering it to me. They keep saying, do you want anything? And I used to keep trying to have something like an Indian or a Chinese takeaway or something, and but there is just, I don't know, it's the sugar, there's whatever's in it. I feel so awful the next day. So I've tried to turn that round, that I have a sirloin steak, or I have, I order myself something expensive, like an expensive steak, that is my treat. So rather than feeling as though I'm being left out, I think, right, okay, this is an opportunity for a ribeye or a sirloin steak or something. And I suddenly realize how nice they are as well. Like, especially if you don't overcook them, which I can be a bit bad for. So I'm trying to go rawer, but I was brought up on well cooked. I don't know whether the quality of the meat wasn't so good. I don't know, but everything was always cooked to an inch of its life. So I'm struggling, but I'm getting there slowly.
Yeah, I've got a similar thing. I was brought up when it's burnt, it's done kind of thing. And, and I've got to the point where I'm quite happy with medium rare, and rare is okay as well. But, when people are telling me, yeah, I have it raw now. And I'm just like, maybe that's still a bridge too far for me for a while.
Yeah, I don't want to have to I don't want to have to lasso my food. I know it's, yeah. But if somebody does it for me, I can eat it that way. I'm not,
Yeah.
I can get through it.
If a vet could get it back on its feet, then I'm probably going to pass for the moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the skin on the chicken, I still can't do chicken skin. I don't know. Maybe it's because I had chickens a lot. I don't know. I just sort of, I don't do chicken skin. I have to just put lots of butter. Or if because I've gone back to what my mum used to do, is she used to have a pudding bowl in the fridge, which she used to pour the fat from the roasts into, and we used to have dripping on toast, as a snack in the evening. And I still remember the taste. It's brilliant, but of course I can't have the toast now. But I've gone back to having a little pudding bowl, and so if I've got something lean like chicken, then I almost sort of put it on the top like butter, and that's quite nice. And it's quite salty, so that's quite nice.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So are you carnivore for life?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it's small wins. Talking to you, I can see I've got small wins. It's other people that are shining the light on the fact that I am getting small wins, and I'm also not getting worse. So, and I get actual good days now where I feel quite excited about life, and I'm now more irritating to everybody again because I'm more energetic. I feel like doing things a bit more, and you suddenly realize that although time gets quicker, it's 16 years almost I've been battling since I felt good. And I thought, when I had energy and I used to run because I loved it. Whereas now I have to say to myself, you've got to go for a run. And if it hurts, it hurts, because you've got to keep moving, and again, you're just really tired the next day. So there's some sort of cortisol. I watch things, I kind of get an idea, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on. But, so it's 16 years I've been trying to get somebody to tell me there's something wrong. But because, I'm pleased there's nothing wrong. There's nothing sort of big going on, but it's just the frustration that it's obviously me just whinging, and I need to just get a stiff upper lip and get on with it. And it's hard. You suddenly realize how much you've been doing that if I'm working, I have to really concentrate because I can't think. My memory goes very easily. And somebody will mention something, and I'm thinking, I know that person, I know that fact, but can I remember it? And it's quite survival, and you suddenly realize how much you've been coping with, and for such a long time. So I definitely can't go backwards. And again, as soon as I eat something that's not good for me, whether it's dairy straight away, and obviously now it seems like eggs is at the moment. Sugar is delayed. It's like the hangover. It's the next day. So I'm kind of stuck, even if I didn't think it was wonderful. I'm stuck. I can't go backwards. And clearly that inflammation was not doing good. I think, is it Kelly Hogan? She took quite a while. I think she took a couple of years. I think she said she even put on weight to begin with. And
Mm.
then, so I'm assuming it's inflammation. And because I'm older, it's clinging on. And to lose 3 to 4 inches off my waist. So I'm now more shapely, which is nice. Is just brilliant, because none of the eating strategies I've tried before have I lost that off my waist, and it would go off all over. And whereas this is really just off my waist and my torso.
Yeah.
So just for that, it's, you know, it's brilliant.
It's like the low fat diet. The only thing anyone ever loses is their temper, you know. It's
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I know. I mean, the low fat came in the 80s, and nobody got any thinner. I mean, everybody was on these low fat diets, and then as soon as they had a glass of wine or a pizza, you know, we'd all just go back to normal again. I just didn't notice any difference. But I think I just ate more. I think I just ate a whole tray of yogurts instead of one, because I thought, oh, that's all right. There's only 2 calories in it. I can have loads of those.
I remember, you know, I was a kid in the 80s, and I remember I see pictures of like my parents and their friends and whatever when we were out camping or we're at a barbecue or something before anyone started eating low fat, and everyone was shapely and looked great and whatever, and like then get to the 90s and it's just done a 180-degree turn, you know.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's just got bigger and bigger. I think possibly, I mean, when my children were at school, I felt sometimes as though I was sort of 10 years. A lot of my friends then were 10 years younger. They'd had their kids in the 20s, and I was in my 30s, so I was considered an older mum. Now it's quite normal to have kids in the 30s, but I remember pinging back straight away after both my kids. But there were girls 10 years younger than me with children sort of same age, and they were going, how do you do it? You know, I'd had my daughter, so I was going to the school gates. She was now sort of 5, 6. So when I had my son, you know, there's a 5-year difference. You know, I'm pulling up with a pram, and I mean, for me, I thought it took 6, 8 months to get myself back to normal, but I didn't really put on the weight when I was pregnant, and then there wasn't quite so much, and it just sort of slowly went back naturally. I didn't rush it, but at the same time, it just went back naturally. But a lot of them put on baby weight and then seemed to keep it and then put on more after. So, you know, and I was thinking, they're 10 years younger than me. You know, I'm the one who should be struggling. So, but I think maybe it was just the different era of, you know, eating. You know, my high fat diet then.
Yeah. So someone asks you for advice. How should I get started to stick with this? What advice would you give them? What are your kind of top tips?
I mean, I think it's quite personal. I think you need, for me, I think I've done diets when I was younger, and I would be really hard on myself. So especially if it was the sort of I What You Eat, which was really vegetable and nut based, which it kind of filled me up, but I never felt sort of happy. I'd eat it and at least I wasn't hungry, but I would always be hungry in the evenings. And I'd already eaten a serving for 4, so I felt I couldn't then have another batch of it, although because it's just vegetables, I didn't really put on weight, so I could have done. But I would go to bed hungry, and I never felt satisfied. So I think the biggest thing is to try and be nice to yourself, because if you're going to do this, in my mind, it needs to be long term. If you can get some people do it for a month and they get brilliant results, and you know, go for it, that's great. But I think for most people, you know, in sort of my situation, certainly it is a change of life. So you kind of need to be kind to yourself. So if you're somebody that really struggles to give things up, and you're going to do that battle where the moment you take it away, you're going to be sort of tantrumy and saying, oh, that's not fair, then definitely just start introducing more meat and swap to butter instead of all these spreads. Maybe start cooking with lard instead of, again, the seed oils and things. You know, I've got family that cook, that grow rapeseed oil or rapeseed for the oil. And so I was thinking, great, that's fresh. That's, you know, that should be good. But of course, it's the process of what they do to it to make it useful to us. So I think it's a case of gradually doing it. In all honesty, is probably the best way for a lot of people. So, you know, a spaghetti bolognese, have less pasta, have less bread. My daughter's doing that now. She did a chili the other day and she just didn't have the rice. So she still made it with some beans, but it was predominantly mince. And then she just added some bits and pieces to kind of, you know, and the beans and the tomatoes. She can still, you know, she's fine on at the moment. So she just didn't have the rice. So maybe she was eating more of the mince, but, you know, but less of things like rice and pasta, which is quite good. For me, I found it easier to go all in because I don't know, maybe it's just impatience. I was hoping to sort of see results quickly. And I also thought if I do it gradually, I'll just keep bumbling along. And certainly for me, it's stick for the long haul. If you're you've got to have these videos that are showing results. And, you know, and I'm so impressed with how ill some people are, and that, you know, so from my point of view, got legitimate illnesses that these have cured. Whereas because mine's kind of downgraded to kind of, it's just foggy head, it's just inflammation, and it doesn't feel as though it's a real illness. You know, I suppose you know, you're so impressed with these other people that have seen something, but not to get focused on that. The weight really, and I know I keep hearing it, but on one hand, some people are losing weight instantly, and I'm like, oh, that would be lovely. But for me, it's just been a slow thing, and you've got to stick with it. You've got to stick with it to get the results.
Yeah, good advice. And yeah, I think it's important to watch things to get the motivation, as you say. But yeah, you got to be careful not to go, well, that's not happening for me.
Yeah.
And it really kind of comes down to, I think for me now, being almost 2 years in, it comes down to, for me, of like, am I feeling good in comparison to how I was feeling before? And it's like, yes, I am, and I can move better and all that kind of thing. So I'm just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I guess you're right. I hadn't really noticed it. I was on quite strong antihistamines that I got from the doctor. So if I had a rash or you know, my face would swell up or my leg would swell up, then I had to have quite strong, and then bouts of steroids to try and sort of shock it. Now I just have a pack of, it's like a hay fever antihistamine. You can just buy it off the shelf, and I still get the odd flare up, but it is nothing like, I mean, I was getting rashes that were lasting for weeks. And if nothing else, when I first used to go to the doctor 16 years ago, I could get an appointment quite quickly, and somebody would see you reasonably quickly, even if they didn't do a lot. Now the appointments are just ridiculous. You really can't get an appointment. And when I pushed it the last time, which would be sort of a couple of years ago, and I got a rash that just wouldn't go, they booked me in with a dermatologist because I'd gone back a couple of times, but it took 6 months to see that dermatologist. And so, of course, the main rash, which had been causing me the trouble, and it had gone all over my top half and my stomach, that had subsided with steroids and antihistamines that they'd put me on. So by the time I went to the dermatologist, I'd only got a little rash on my foot that day. I don't know whether it was stress, but I got a little rash on my foot, and I was quite chuffed because I thought, oh, good, I've got something to show her, because after 6 months, you know, I'd got photos, but, you know, nothing else. So I went in, and bless her, she just said, well, it's athlete's foot. And I said, no, it came up this morning. No. No, that's so. Anyway, I just, as you do, you just shuffle out because you just think, oh, there's no point. That's all they can offer.
Yeah. But I'm really happy to hear that it's much reduced from what it was like before.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So it's the
Yeah.
small wins again, which,
Mm.
I mean, and at least it's not getting worse. I mean, if I hadn't have done this, if I carried on eating and that the way I was, then I presume I would get worse. My memory and my ability to work and things I'd just have to sort of give up and retire. And I'm sure the people are doing that. You're sort of thinking, I can't keep up with this. If I answer the phone, I can't talk to people. I can't work in the workplace. I can't keep up with colleagues. So certainly working for myself helps, but I mean, it would have got to the point that even that would be tricky. So yeah, it's the small wins you've got to see.
Definitely.
And hopefully sort of another sort of, do look back again in another year. Because I'm assuming it's inflammation that's why I'm clinging on to a certain amount of weight. I was only, I'm trying to think how much that is in pounds. I suppose I was about 118 pounds, so 8.5 stone when I was early 40s. And I'd say I'm just under the 10 at the moment. So that's, I don't know, is it 140 pounds? So 138, something like that. So I haven't got loads to, compared with maybe some of my counterparts, but it's still a stone that would be quite nice to shift.
Yeah, it's always gonna be nice to shift it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thinking another thing that I noticed that obviously if you're trying to do this way of eating, a lot of people aren't taking supplements. I mean, if I sort of the Sean Bakers and big beefy men that seem to sort of just sort of live on their steaks, and they seem to have really good results, and they don't seem to take any supplements and things. I having taken the ones for my thyroid, I mean, I think there's selenium and iodine, which I think are recommended to be quite good for you, because selenium's in eggs. So if I'm not eating eggs at the moment, then that's probably quite a good one to take. But when I sort of slipped up and had a bit of extra cake over Christmas, though they don't work, the foggy head comes back with a vengeance, worse. So I think the supplements are helping, but they wouldn't help if I didn't also watch what I eat.
Interesting. Wow.
And it's a nice way to eat. I'm not hungry. I mean, I
Mm.
can have a big fat steak at the end of the day, and if I'm worried I'm overeating, then I'll keep that meal to the end of the day, and I can stuff my face, which is brilliant, and feel really full. And I've got that nice feeling that if I overeat, so I go and have another steak because I'm hungry, I'm not going to put any sort of much weight on. Whereas, if I had a week of eating takeaways and leftovers and things on top of my meals normally, then, 4 or 5 pounds would easily go on. So it's a good way of eating.
Yeah. So Helen, you gave me an email address. Is that okay if I share that in the show notes with people if they want to reach
The
out?
Helen Elizabeth one would be great. Yes.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate your time.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you.